In the winter solstice, the Irish people would gather to tell the old stories and sing the old songs, to celebrate and dance and poetry and rhyme. This is the time between times. This, the darkest night. Between December 21st and December 25th, they would gather for 5 days and 5 nights to celebrate who we are as a people, to connect with the cycles of the seasons on this, the winter solstice. Winds of the world, breath of the mother, we welcome you, we welcome you.
Fire in the sky, fire in the earth, we welcome you, we welcome you.
Rivers and streams, the earth's own dreams, we welcome you, we welcome you.
Mountains of stones, the earth's old bones, we welcome you, we welcome you, we welcome you, we welcome you.
We would gather believing, as I believe, that the old stag of last year would wander off into the forest, and we would wait for the stag to return with a golden child on its back to celebrate the coming of the new year. Listen, do you hear it? Does the stag return? Let us celebrate this, the longest night, this, the time between time, where there is no time, the timeless time. Let's celebrate. This evening I've gathered a few of my friends, including you. I'm so glad you're here. With Blame Not the Bard, a brilliant band, and a troupe of local dancers. This first story I would like to tell you is a story of Finn Mccool and the Salmon of Knowledge. Finn's father was a great warrior who actually tied himself to a rock so he could not be moved. And he fought off 100 of his enemy before he was slain. But once he was dead, his wife feared for their infant child. What if the enemy tried to kill my son to claim the throne? And so she made a terrible choice. The only choice she felt she had. She hid her son away. She gave him to 2 old Druid women who lived out in the forest. And they hid him in an ancient oak tree. And these women were wise in the ways of the woods. They taught him which plants were medicine, which berries you could eat, and which were poisonous, just in case. They taught him to fence with sword and shield, for Druid women were warriors once and might yet be again. But when young Finn had grown to be a strapping young lad, and they felt that they had taught the young lad everything they could, they sent him to the tutor, Finnegis. Some would argue Finnegis was the greatest poet that Ireland ever knew. He told the stories of his father, the ancient Celtic cycle of tales. Now, Finnegis, the poet, had 2 things that he loved. Poetry, of course, and the other was fishing in the River Boyne. There was one fish in particular that he sought, the fabled salmon of knowledge. For as the old prophecies foretold, if you were the one who caught the salmon of knowledge, if you were the first to eat a bite, a morsel of that fish, then you would be blessed with a gift of tongues, knowledge of all things in this world and worlds beyond. You could communicate with creatures of all sorts and manners. If you could talk to your dog, what would you say? What is your cat whispering to you now? And the birds that wing their way over as they're heading south on this long winter's night, what are they saying? Finnegis, the poet, thought it only right that he should have this gift of tongues. Well, one afternoon, when young Finn was lying there by the shore of the River Boyne, watching clouds race past, he heard his master shout, "What joy, what rapture, my treasure I capture!" Maybe not his best art at poetry, but it finally landed, the fabled salmon of knowledge. He brought the fish to shore and he gave it to young Finn. He said, "Boy, I want you to skin this fish, cook him up for me, but whatever you do, do not taste one morsel. I, Finnegis, the poet, should have the gift of tongues." Well, young Finn did as he was told. He built a roaring fire and he set a large flat rock on top, so the rock was getting red hot. He filleted that fish and he mixed a special ointment of herbs and honey, some herbs he had learned from the old Druid women, and he slathered the salmon with the salve and he placed it on that red hot rock and he watched as it broiled. And there he saw under the little morsel of skin there was a bubble of oil. And as the fish heated, that bubble of oil expanded. And as that little bubble rose up, young Finn pushed his thumb in to push it down. When that bubble burst on his thumb and he placed his thumb to his tongue, in that moment, his thoughts began to swim. His mind raced as fast as the clouds overhead. And of course, it was at that moment that Finnegis, the poet, came back to the fire. And he knew. He said, "Finn, you've done it, haven't you? You tasted the salmon of knowledge as I forbid it. Maybe it's only right that you, young Finn Mccool, that you should have the gift of tongues. For someday you will rise up to be the greatest poet that Ireland ever knew, and a warrior too. Don't we wish that more of our rulers were poets, or could at least string sentences together? Well, from that moment on, Finn had knowledge of all things in this world and the worlds beyond. Whenever he was faced with a question he couldn't answer, a problem he couldn't solve, all he had to do was touch his thumb to his tongue, and somehow he knew. Now, if we were indeed together for 4 long nights and 5 days, I could tell you 100 stories of Finn the giant, Finn and the many wondrous things that he accomplished in his life. But some of those stories, they might have to wait for another day and another time. Thank you for listening. Let me introduce to you one of my new favorite bands, Blame Not the Bard. Take it away. Wasn't that great? I love Blame Not the Bard, one of my new favorite bands. This is one of my favorite stories from one of my favorite Irish storytellers. When William Butler Yeats was a boy, it was actually forbidden to speak Gaelic, to speak Irish. And as a child, they would gather in the hedgerows, in the hedge schools, and they would pass on the stories and the culture. And then when William Butler Yeats grew up and became the famous poet, one of his first priorities and one of his greatest gifts to us, the descendants of the Irish diaspora, was his collections of Irish folk tales, including this story, one of my favorite stories, the Puka and the Piper. In the town of Galway, there was a half-wit, and he was a piper of no great means. But whenever he went to the pub on a Friday night, somebody would toss him a few coins in order for him to play quite poorly. And as he played the pipes, people would laugh, roar with laughter, and buy him another round, so he didn't mind. But one night, and it was the longest night, it was the winter solstice. Maybe he'd been at the pub a bit too long. Maybe he'd had a pint too many. When he was wandering home, he stopped on a small bridge over the river. And as he gazed into the dark, murky water, he heard clippity-clop, clippity-clop, hooves coming up behind him. He turned, and he saw a puka. For those that don't know, a puka is a man from the belly button up, and from the belly button down. He is more of a goat, with 4 legs and cloven hooves, and small horns if you look carefully in its curly hair. The puka had heard him playing, and the puka said, "The queen of the banshees is having a ball, and she wishes to have a piper." And the puka scoops up this young lad and tosses him upon his back and races off the bridge towards the distant mountains. "Where are you taking me?" the boy cries, holding on to the horns. "I'm taking you to the mountains where the queen banshee herself will have a ball, and you shall play for them. But I don't play well enough for the queen of the banshees. Touch the whistle to your mouth, boy, and you shall play." And as he was riding along, he touched the whistle to his mouth, and he began to play the pipes. It was the sweetest song he had ever heard. The puka stopped at the base of the mountain, and with his cloven hoof, he rapped 3 times, and the mountain opened. And inside, all manner of beasts. There were elves with pointed toes and pointed noses. There were leprechauns and banshees and people of the fae. And when the puka entered, the queen banshee calmed the hall. "Who is that you have on your back?" "It is the finest piper in all of Ireland. Play, boy, play." The boy climbed down off the back of this goat man, and he began to play, and sure enough, it was the sweetest song. The queen raised her hand, and a band appeared, and the band began to play. And then dancers appeared, and dancers began to dance as the band played late into the night. And finally, the puka said, "It's time to pay the piper." And he took a hat and he went round the crowd, and all manner of fairy gold was placed therein. And he gave the hat to the boy. The boy put the hat on his head, but put the gold in his pockets. And he climbed back onto the back of that puka, and they raced out of the mountain, across the wide valley, back to the bridge where the two had first met. And as the boy climbed down off the Puka said, "You have two things you did not have before. You have the gift of song. Use it wisely. And from this day forward, you have the other half of your wits." The boy was amazed. As he headed home, he could see the first crack of light in the eastern sky. But when he arrived at home, his door was locked. His mother latched it tight. "Mother, mother, let me in. I'm the richest man of all of Ireland, and I'm the greatest player of the pipe that anyone has ever heard." His mother sleepily opened the door and said, "You're still a half-wit, though." He said, "I don't believe it," until the boy emptied his pockets, and there was gold upon the bed. But in that very moment, the first rays of light came through the window, and the gold turned to leaves and twigs. But when the boy touched the pipe to his lips and he began to play, it was true. He was the greatest player of the pipes that Ireland ever knew. And many a night his pint was filled. He went from pub to pub, playing tunes and leading the dance. Much as Blame Not the Bard will play us another tune. Take it away.
'Twas in the county Mayo, May Day in Glenmoyle. Jack Kelly came a-walking out, his milk cows to deploy. But when he got down to the barn, he let out an awful cry.
Oh no!
Not a drop of milk for me, me cow has cried. Oh my, what trouble could there be? Jack rose up in the morning, in the barn he found a hare. Wound but do not kill her, just give that hare a scare. Then Jack paid the hag a visit, down in her country home. She was hopping on the leg, and the cows were left alone. Coming up soon, our dear friend Fox will be telling a story about the sea and the creatures in it. So to get you in the mood, we're going to start out with a couple sea shanties here. Set the stage a little bit. So this first one's called Holloway Joe. It's a song that would be sung while on the different sailing vessels, be it cargo ships or whaling ships, and sailors all around the world would sing this song to pass the time away. When I was a little boy, so my mother told me, Tommy, way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. That if I did not kiss the girls, my lips would all grow moldy. Tommy, way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. Now way Holloway, this good ship now is rolling. Tommy, way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. St. Patrick was a gentleman, he's born of decent people. Way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. He built a church in Dublin town, and on it put a steeple. Way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. Now once I was in Ireland, a-digging turf and potatoes. Tommy, way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. But now I'm on a Yankee ship, a-hauling rigs and braces. Hey, way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. Now way Holloway, we're bound for better weather. Tommy, way Holloway, will Holloway Joe. This next tune tells a story about a group of whalers who left Ireland and went sailing north towards Greenland to find some whales. It's called Greenland whale fisheries. In 1846, on March the 18th day, well, we hoisted our colors to the top of the mast, and for Greenland sailed away, great boys. Now for Greenland sailed away. Up! Well, look out in the cross trees he spied a spyglass in his hand. There's a whale, and a wild fishing cry, and it blows at every span, great boys. Now it blows at every span. Well, the captain stood on the quarter deck, the S-glass in his eye. Overhaul, let your Navy's tackles fall, and go put your boats to sea, great boys. Now go put your boats to sea. Up! Then the harpoon struck and the line came out with a single flourish of his tail. He capsized our boat and we lost 5 men, and we did not catch that whale, great boys. No, we did not catch that whale. Well, the losing of those 5 jelly men, we grieved the captain sore, but the losing of that fine wild fish, now we grieved him 10 times more, great boys. Now we grieved him 10 times more. Ho! Greenland is a barren land. It's a land that bears no green, where there's ice and snow in the wild fish roam, and the daylight seldom seen. No, the daylight seldom seen. Huh!
It was a stormy night as Kathleen sat by the fire, reading a good book. She was lost in the ancient lore, and her mind seemed to travel back in time. And then in the book, there was a story about the Silkie. You know about the Silkie. They say that if you're on the beach when the moon is full, sometimes if you're lucky, you'll see the seals come up, swim onto the beach, and they'll peel off their seal skin. And the women, the most beautiful women you could ever imagine, they'll dance there naked in the moonlight. And if you're lucky enough to capture one of those seal skins, then that woman will come home with you and she'll be your bride. If you can hide that skin and she never finds it, she'll stay with you. But if she finds that skin maybe hidden in the thatch, the sea she goes. It means leaving her own children, for the sea is her true home. As Kathleen was reading of the ancient Silkie, she thought about this boy in her fourth grade class. He had big moon-shaped eyes and dark hair, and there was just something about the look of him. The story was that maybe his great-great-great-grandma was a Silkie, maybe one of your ancestors as well. And the way that boy looked at her, she was in love. And sometimes the other children in school, they were mean to her. They'd say, your father, he hunts seals. The seal folk, they have a way of caring for their own. If he knew what was good for him, he'd leave the seal alone. And Kathleen would come home hurt. What did they mean by this? And her mother would say, just ignore him. You have a nice pair of boots every year when winter comes, and a nice warm coat thanks to the seal that your father hunts. When your father was a fisherman, sometimes the nets were full and sometimes they were not. But you have a roof over your head. You have a good meal on your table every night. You shouldn't complain about your father's work. But it bothered her that night as she sat there reading, her thoughts swimming, the storm raging. Just then, a bolt of lightning and thunder rippled the house and brought her back to this moment. There were chores she was supposed to get done before her mother got home, and her father. It was after dark, and where was he? He should have been home hours ago. And just as that thought came into her mind, she heard a knock on the door. Who could it be at this hour? She got up, and when she opened the door, standing there was a tall man dressed in a long, dark coat. And as if he heard her concern, he said, Kathleen, your father's in trouble, and only you can save his life. Come with me now. Even though Kathleen had never seen this man before, she was drawn to him. He climbed upon his steed and motioned for her to join him. He offered her a hand, and she leapt onto the back of the most brilliant gray mare. And the horse turned, and it ran towards the sea. It ran faster and faster. As it came to the cliff above the seashore far below, it did not slow down. It sped up, and it leapt to clear the rocks, to enter the sea. I can't swim, she said. Take a deep breath and hold it, for you shall swim. She took the biggest breath she had ever taken. As they plunged down, 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 sploosh, they cleared the rocks on the shore. Down, down, down. She looked over, and what she saw was not a man in a long coat, but a seal with flippers swimming beside her. And her hands, like your hands, if you grew in between the bones, you have the same structure as a seal's flipper who once lived upon the land. And she swam down and down and down to the very depths of the ocean, through an ancient forest of kelp. And there they came into a clearing, and they saw a palace rise up, made of coral and rubies and pearls and pirates' treasure. And on the porch of this palace were 100 seals. And when the seals saw her and this young seal, they parted to make a way for them. Kathleen followed as they swam up through the crowd and into the palace. And the young seal turned and said, Kathleen, only you can save my father's life. I'll do it. Whatever it takes, she said. As they swam in the throne room, they saw the king of seals lying on a bed, a huge knife deep into his side. She recognized the hilt, the handle of that knife. It was her father's knife. It hung on a hook by the back door. What can I do? Said Kathleen. He said, you must pull the knife from my father. She wrapped her flipper fingers around it and she pulled for all she was worth. I can't, she said. You must, he said. She wrapped her flipper fingers, but this time, as she went to pull, she felt his flipper hands reach around her. And she turned to see another seal had grabbed him, and a third and a fourth and a dozen seals. And this time, as Kathleen pulled for all she was worth, the knife came free. Place your hands upon the wound, he said. She placed her flippers there. The pain of that wound came through her hands, her arms, and was gone. The pain was gone. And the Seal King rose up. He said, Kathleen, you've saved my life, you have. And I owe you whatever you want. It is yours. Simply ask, and it shall be received. A chest of pirate gold, rubies and pearls beyond number. Ask, and it is yours. An island, Roan Inish, Seal Island, your family can dwell merrily the rest of their days. Name it, Kathleen, and it is yours. Kathleen turned from the king of the seals to the young prince, and she said, I gave you your father. All I want is mine. The king of the seals said, Kathleen, you're the girl we thought you were. Follow my son, and he'll take you to your dad. And they swam out of the palace, through the crowd that parted, up, and up, through the kelp forest, up and up to the surface of the sea. And there she saw it. From down below, her father's carrack, his boat, tossed in the wind-swept storm. She swam for all she was worth and leapt out of the sea, and she landed in her father's boat. Her father looked on, disbelieving at first. A seal. He rubbed his eyes and saw it was no seal. It was his daughter. Father, I've come to save you. And she grabbed the oars and she rowed for all she was worth. And they moved steadily through the storm to the shore. And once they beached the boat, she helped her father from it. She pulled the carrack above the high tide line. And she helped her father climb the cliff and back eventually to their home. Now when they arrived at home, aunts and uncles and cousins had all gathered. Where was Kathleen on this stormy night? Where was her father? When they saw the two arrive safely, everyone was pleased. And when they asked, Kathleen told them the truth. She said, a stranger came and took me to my father and helped me to bring him home. And with that bit of truth, everyone departed. But when it was just Kathleen, her mother and her father turned to her and said, Kathleen, there was something else going on this night. Tell me true. And Kathleen told them the rest of this story. But then she turned to her father and she said, Father, you must promise me that... But before she could finish the sentence, he placed his finger on her lips. And then he turned to the hearth, to the fire, and he prayed a long prayer. And he turned back and said, 1,000 times I vow, never again shall I harm a seal? And he kept that promise. And returned to the life of a fisherman. And sometimes his nets were full and the family lived bountifully. But sometimes the fish, where the schools wandered, who knows? Sometimes when the nets were near empty and he caught maybe one small mackerel or one sole sardine, that's what they had for supper. But when they would skin that little mackerel, cut open the belly, inside there'd be a ruby or a pearl. And Kathleen knew it was a gift from the realm of the Seal King. I never tire of blame not the bard. Am I the bard to blame? I'm not sure. But isn't this a great band? Maybe you can invite them to your Irish festival sometime. And those dancers, let's hear it again for the dancers. Weren't they great? This was one of the first Irish stories that I learned. And my wife and I went to Ireland several years ago to explore the origins of this story. If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free, on the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring to Erin across the sea. On the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring till Erin's fair shore I'd see. If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free. Oisin was a son of Mccool. And Oisin loved to hunt with horse and hound. And early one morning he found himself hunting with his father's two favorite hounds, Bran and Mccool. And as he rode his horse to the top of a hill in the valley below, he saw a snow-white deer. Ruff, 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 ruff. The hounds gave chase through bog and fen, over hill and dale, but every time he came to the top of the next hill, the white deer seemed to disappear. But the hounds, with their nose to the ground, picked up the scent and off, ruff, 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 until eventually he came to a quiet bay. And just then he saw the white deer leap into a bush, and a fairy mist blew in from the shore, and everything disappeared. And with the next breeze, the mist was gone, and standing there was not a white stag, but a beautiful white stallion, silver and gold braided into its mane and tail, and holding the reins was the most beautiful woman that Oisin had ever seen, in a gown of green, embroidered with rubies and pearls. Her long red hair trailed nearly to the ground behind her, and she introduced herself. She said, "I am Niamh, the princess of the fairy realm, Ternanog, and I've watched you grow from a wee young lad to a strapping young buck, and nothing would make me so happy as to call you my man. Will you come with me to Ternanog, the isle of the ever young, where the rivers flow with milk and honey, and time does not exist? Will you be my one true love?" Oisin had grown up with the tales of Ternanog. Many a night he lay abed dreaming of Princess Niamh. Of course, he climbed down off his horse. He crossed the sand of the strand and fell to one knee and took her hand and said, "Nothing would make me so happy as to call you my bride." She leapt onto the snow-white steed, and he climbed onto the horse behind her. And in that very moment, his father, Finn Mccool, and the Fianna, the band of warriors, they came riding over the ridge. And when Finn saw he cried out, "No, don't go! I fear that if you leave, I'll never see you no more." But his son had fallen under a fairy spell. He did not hear his father's cry. The white steed turned towards the sea and shook itself 3 times as it leapt from sand to surf, its silver-shod hoofs touching the crest of each white-capped wave as it raced across the sea, faster than the wind at its back, faster than I could tell you, and maybe twice as fast as you could tell me. But even at this great distance, Oisin could see even at this great distance, Oisin could see the fabled isle of Ternanog. There were flocks of birds, innumerable, dark in the sky. There were huge herds of cattle, wild cattle, grazing on the hillside. And salmon fairly leapt from sea to shore, crying, "Eat me, eat me!" The horse shook itself 3 times as it leapt from surf to sand. It entered a grand boulevard guarded by giants. But Oisin, being a bit of a warrior himself, he gazed into the eyes of these giants, and he knew they were friend, not foe. When the giants spied their Princess Niamh, they parted and bowed, clearing a way for them. And they came to the castle, a castle even grander than Tara, Finn Mccool's castle. And a little elfish boy with pointed ears and pointed toes lowered the drawbridge. They crossed it into the courtyard where the king and the queen of the fairy realm awaited their arrival. Now, Oisin knew a thing or two about court protocol, so when he climbed down off the horse, he offered a hand to Niamh. He crossed the cobblestones and he fell to one the king, and he said, "With your permission, I ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." The king took the hand of Oisin and lifted him to his feet. He took the hand of his daughter and he clasped the 2 hands above him, and he said, "Let no man tear asunder what true love hath brought together." And with a snap of his fingers, a priest appeared. The vows were exchanged, a feast was spread, and then a band began to play. And they feasted for 9 days and 9 nights, and every day more glorious than the one before it. They gave me a bottle of mead to share with you, but it broke along the way. And Oisin, he fell into deep, wet bliss. His days were spent hunting with horse and hound, and his nights in his true love's arms. And I'll let you imagine. Every morning more glorious than the one before, for time did not exist. Whenever he was hungry, a feast appeared. Whenever he was thirsty, he had a pint in his hand. One morning he arose before the sun to go hunting, and just as the first ray of light came over the horizon, he saw a tiny shamrock, and it reminded him of Ireland. And that first ray of light struck an even smaller drop of dew. As the dewdrop formed and fell, an even smaller rainbow appeared. And for a moment, the spell was broken, and Oisin remembered his home. If I were a lark in the morning, home in my heaven free, on the wings of the dawn I'd be soaring to Erin across the sea. He went back to his bride, and he begged and pleaded. She tried to dissuade him, but when she saw she could not, she said, "The white steed knows the way, but promise me this, you shall not dismount. Swear to me, you will not get down off the horse. Make a solemn vow. You will not touch the earth, for if you do, you cannot return to me." And he said, 3 times you ask, 3 times I vow. I miss you now before I go, but go I must. And he climbed back onto the steed. It shook itself 3 times as it leapt from shore to surf. It crossed the ocean. But when it arrived back in Ireland, everything had changed. The once mighty race of Irish men and women that he recalled from his youth seemed half-starved and bedraggled. He searched all day for his father's and could not find it. When he saw an old woman hoeing her peas or potatoes, he said, "Where's my father, Finn Mccool, and the band of warriors, the Fianna?" "Finn Mccool, it's been 300 years since he's ruled Ireland's shore. I remember the tales my grandfather told me when I was a wee lass." And then it began to dawn on him. What he thought was one day in the other world was a year in thus. And the year or so he imagined he was gone, more than 300 years had passed. He found his father's castle, Tara, had fallen into ruin with thorn and thistle grown throughout. And just then, he saw 2 young men straining with the weight of a huge keg of ale. He rode in close and with one hand grabbed the keg and tossed it into the back of the cart. But with the weight of the keg, the strap on his saddle snapped and the saddle slid and he fell from the horse. The moment he touched the ground, he aged 300 years. The young man looked on in disbelief as he went from being a strapping young buck to a withered bag of bones. His teeth fell out, his hair as well. Just then, bong, 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 bong. They heard the church bells chime the hour. For St. Patrick had a new God and a new religion to Ireland's shore. Oisin said, "Take me to the sacred ground for a proper burial. I fear my time is short." The young men lifted him into the back of the wagon with a keg of ale. And they took him to the cathedral where Saint himself greeted Oisin. And they passed the night telling tales and singing songs. And the scribes of St. Patrick wrote these stories down. This is true. They wrote these stories down so I could learn them. And I could tell them to you. And you could learn them too. And you can tell them to your children and your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 300 years from now, might still recall the glory days of Ireland. what once was and shall be again.
Last night as I lay dreaming of pleasant days gone by, me mind was bent on rambling to Ireland I did fly. Well, I stepped on board a vision and I followed with the will, till the next I came to anchor at the cross at Spansel Hill. It being on the 23rd of June, the day before the fair, when Ireland's sons and daughters and friends assembled there. Well, the young, the old, the brave and the bold made their duties to fulfill at the parish church, including a mile from Spansel Hill. Well, I went to see me neighbor and to hear what they might say. Well, the old ones were all dead and gone, the young ones turning gray. And I met with Taylor Quigley, he's as bold as ever still, and he used to mend me bridges when I lived at Spansel Hill. Then I paid a flying visit to my first and only love. She's as white as any lily, as gentle as a dove. Well, she threw her arms around me, saying, Johnny, I love still. But I'm now the farmer's daughter and the bride of Spansel Hill. Well, I dreamt I held and kissed her as in the days of yore. Oh, Johnny, you're only joking, as me's a time before. Then the cock he crew in the morning, he crew both loud and shrill, and I woke in California, many miles from Spansel Hill.
We offer gratitude to the eternal fire of love and offer you the blessings of the fire. May the light of love burn within your breast for all eternity, for every day that goes unloved goes unlived.
As you celebrate this, the longest night, we thank you for coming and offer the blessings of water. the blessings of the Salmon. May your dreams grant you the wisdom to see the repercussions of your actions and help you to make wise choices for the future.
And we thank you for singing or humming along, well, maybe at least tapping your toes. And we offer you the blessings of wind, the blessings of the lark. May your mornings and spring times yet to come be always filled with song.
We give thanks for the great stag who carries us through the time that is not a time. We offer you the blessings of the earth, the blessings of the stag. May your darkest nights be followed by brighter dawns. And as the earth accepts all loss with the promise of renewal, may you weather this winter with the hope of spring's return. Does the great stag return? Do you hear him? Let us end with the parting glass.
Oh, of all the money that e'er I've spent, I have spent it in good company, and of all the harm that ever I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night, and joy be with you Have I had money enough to spend and leisure time to sit a while? There is nothing in this town who sorely has my heart begun. Her rosy cheeks and ruby lips, I own she has my heart. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night, and joy be with you all. Oh, of all the comrades that e'er I had, they are sorry for my going away. And of all the sweethearts that e'er I've had, they have wished me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I will gently rise and softly call. Good night, and joy be with you all. Good night, and joy be with you all. I think we're live.
I think so.
Hi, everybody. With you all. We have a special guest star.
Hey. Glad to see so many folks here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you want to type a question in the chat or allow your video, we can have a brief conversation here. Thanks, Sally. I'm glad you like the show. Love doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun as well. Had a lot of fun picking some tunes that fit with the stories, and trying to really accent the stories and make sure that we kind of tell a multimedia tale.
And I knew it was a risk inviting the dancers, as I anticipated. Didn't those kids steal the show? Weren't they delightful?
They did.
That was so great.
Although there was one Easter egg. I don't know if you caught this, but a very talented fiddler.
Also a dancer. Who knew?
Yes,
Who knew?
yes. I snuck a jig in there. I couldn't resist.
Yeah. Well, and the trick of zooming and editing all that together was, I'm sure, monumental.
Yes.
So I can't see. Are there others here to join us, or other questions, comments?
I think we're trying to get some dancer speakers here as well. So, oh, there she is. Hello.
Introduce yourself.
Treya, can you tell us a little bit about you and the school and how you got roped into this craziness?
Maybe she can't hear us.
She might not be able
Are
to.
you muted, or is your mic on?
I have earphones on. Hi. My name is Treya Champaign. I'm a TCRG and certified Irish dance teacher, and I am. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you now. Yes.
You do? Okay. Sorry. No, I could hear you when I started talking. I think my mic's on.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
I think.
Well,
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, we're figuring that out.
while we're getting the dance school online here, we do have a question. What came first, the passion for the stories or the music? Or do you find them to be intertwined? I'll be honest, for me, it was the music all the way. But I think we may have some different perspectives here.
Well, and obviously for me, it's the stories, but I love when they're intertwined.
Yes.
Because I think the stories add so much to the music adds so much to the song. And then when you get dancers on board, it's just that much better. They all go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we were, that's just kind of culture in general. Like there was briefly mentioned in one of the stories was how, the Irish language was outlawed for a period of time. And one of the best examples we saw of that was when we were in Ireland in 2015. There's a cultural center in Cashel that is does a really great job of kind of just telling the stories, but also the stories and the song and how everything's very intertwined. And you're walking through this museum, and it's stories from ancient Ireland all the way to the 1970s, and just how music and culture and stories are so intertwined in the Irish culture. So it's I don't see how you could separate them.
And I think that's really the beauty of music, is that it spans across time. And then when you're telling these stories, right, we are all living a story. And so when we have the opportunity, I think, to bring those three things together, between the music, the stories, and then the dance, or the physical expression of that story, I think magic happens then myself. But on the note of dancers, Treya, are you able to hear us better now?
I think I'm better. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the school? And I know a lot, but these guys might not.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Treya Champaign. My school is the Champaign Academy of Irish Dance, and we're based in North Liberty, Iowa City area, but we're also near the Quad Cities in the town of Cambridge or Bishop Hill. And so we're kind of we're a really small group, but we're trying to branch out and spread our joy of dancing. We really enjoy doing productions like this one and being part of our community. And I think that's really what it's all about. So thank you for having us and including us in this project.
I was really glad to have you. You know, I'm listening to this conversation. You know, I'm thinking about modern musical theater and how, you know, Broadway is its own thing, but what we were trying to do tonight, and I think you guys hit it out of the park, is much older than that. That traditionally, if we were at a ceilidh, if we were in an Irish home on the longest night, there would be this just natural blending back and forth of a story leads to a song and the song leads to a dance. And when people are tired of the dance, they want to sit and rest and listen to another story, which gets them all pumped up for another song, story, dance. And so the dancers added so much. Thank you.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you for having us. And there's it's really fun to have to work with Nikki, because she's a musician and a dancer now. So I love it. It's really fun. It's really fun. So she can like understand what's going on and how to put this all together.
So if anybody else wanted to type a question in the chat, any more questions or comments, we'd be happy to entertain a few more.
And you have to excuse me, I'm hiding in my son's bedroom right now. So you can tell, along with the cat. He's joining us as well.
Well, I can relate. I'm actually in Kansas City spending the week grandparenting my toddler and infant grandchildren. But I'm actually about to head to a Methodist church where I will be Santa, sharing the history of Christmas traditions through story and song on a live Zoom program. If you want to join me at 6:30.
Well, I hope you grow a beard very quickly.
No, I'm going to borrow yours. If you can just send it over.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great couple more questions here. How many years have you been doing Celtic Solstice?
Actually, I think this is 21. So about 20 years we've been celebrating this performance. And, you know, as I've discussed with the band, I've worked with various bands over the years, but really pleased to reach out to somebody more local. And knowing that the building that John Taylor and I share, the Bishop Hill Creative Commons, where we would have hosted the show live in a normal year and might again next year, also host the dance school. I was really, really pleased that everybody was available. I've been doing Irish stories for my lifetime, 40-something years. My wife and I went to Ireland 20 years ago, and the Celtic show began around that time. And plans to do the show again? Yes, we've been doing it every year, so we will obviously do it every. And actually, we've already talked about maybe a summer solstice and Beltane and Samhain to do the whole cycle. So watch for it on the Bishop Hill Creative Commons Facebook page.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun with you know, yearly traditions in Ireland. I don't know if anyone has been to Ireland or if you're planning on going. You know, especially this kind of topic, we would recommend going to Newgrange, which is a very cool experience based around the solstice as well. And I think they do the other solstice, but you know,
It's summer and winter.
It's basically it's a place that was built by the ancient people, that on the day of the solstice, light shines in through a very, very specific part of the building and lights everything up.
Have you been?
We have been. We did not go on the solstice because those are some hard to obtain tickets. but they do a great job of like making a light bulb.
Yeah, the light comes through the lintel, the little window above the doorway. Yes. On the winter solstice. It's lined up for the darkest night. And my wife and I were there just a couple days before, so almost exactly 20 years ago. Really? And it was so cool because it's hard to get a ticket on the solstice, but if you're there 3 days before or 3 days after, it has the same effect. And we could see that, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, we were there. We were there in March, and they used a light bulb.
Yeah.
That
so
works.
I'll take that other question. What's your favorite beverage to celebrate the winter solstice?
Oh gosh. Well, Corey's not with us this evening, but I know his would probably be an IPA, I think. But I think that might just be his favorite beverage.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan right now of the Trader Joe's sparkling cranberry. I'm not sure if that's solstice-y, but it's very festive.
It is festive.
I'll have a Guinness.
Well,
I prefer
mentioned in
tea.
the story, mead. I make mead with the help of my honeybees, and we always have a toast of mead. So I'll probably be doing that a little later.
Yeah, you still have to be Santa later tonight. So.
It's a celebratory toast.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a great success, and thank you all for participating, and thank you for hitting the tip jar. And I'll divvy that up once I get a total. And thank you for supporting live programming, and thank you to John Taylor and Frank Blaine in particular for their work in editing and filming and all of that. So
Yes.
The North Pole beckons.
All right.
Yes. Well, thank you all for joining us. We
Yes.
hope you enjoyed the show as well. I think everyone hopes that you enjoyed the show. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Be well.
And it will be posted on our Facebook page for 1 week. So if you didn't get a chance to see the whole thing tonight, or you want to share it with your friends, thank you in advance for sharing it. We'll keep it up through next Saturday, the 26th. So you can share it with friends and family.
Yeah. Send it to all your relatives.
It's the best last minute Christmas gift. Just saying.
Good night.